Yeah, very welcome along to the Football Show. Richie McCormack here with you. Thank you so much for stopping by. Paris Saint-Germain have started off the Ligue 1 season pretty well. 2 wins, 2 games, 5 goals in each of them, but all is not as hunky-dory in the camp as those results would suggest. To discuss that in further detail, I'm delighted to say we're joined on the line by Philippe Auclair. Philippe, good evening to you.
Good evening to you, Richie. Good evening to all of you.
Great to hear from you again. Nice to have you back as a regular during the start of the season. But as you mentioned there, PSG, on paper have started the season well. They had a 5-0 win away to Clermont. They obviously beat Montpellier there most recently 5-2. But it's the fallout from that game, and I guess in the game there's been some childish stuff after it, has fallen on social media, has basically engulfed the club once more. So when Christophe Galtier got the job, he made this claim that there was going to be less bling bling around the club, that things were going to be far more prosaic, and he was going to just bring it back to its roots almost, and kind of do away with this mentality of big stars. That's fallen by the wayside pretty quickly.
Oh, well, I don't know. Bringing PSG back to its roots, by the way, is quite an interesting notion, because what
50
are
years,
the roots? Yeah. And it was a very, very different club at the time. No, it's absolutely extraordinary, the amount of publicity this got in French media. I'll give you an example of that. I was supposed to be on one of the main French radio stations on Sunday evening to talk about pretty intense weekend of football in England, between what had happened to Manchester United in particular at Brentford and elsewhere. But anyway, I was delayed, and I couldn't understand why that was the reason, why that was the case. And then I realized, I was put on hold, and I realized they were talking about the incident. And I thought, this is ridiculous. How long has this been going on? And they'd been talking for half an hour on a single incident. And I think, we'll just briefly sum up what happened. PSG played against Montpellier. It was the second game of the season in Ligue 1. They'd won the first one without Kylian Mbappe very nicely indeed, 5-0 in Clermont. This was at the Parc des Princes, and Montpellier was the opponent. Not an opponent that you would expect to create much of a problem for PSG. There's a penalty whistled in favour of PSG. Kylian Mbappe, who was designated as number one penalty taker by Christophe Galtier before the game, took it, missed it. Then there's a second penalty kick, and Neymar takes the ball, and basically, I'm going to take it. That's what he means. And Mbappe is not too happy about it, and there is an exchange between the two players. It's not an angry exchange or anything like that, but it doesn't look good, I must say. It's one of those things, oh, come on, give me the ball. No, I won't give the ball to you. It's mine. And it goes on and on and on. And then, Neymar takes the penalty and scores it, as is his wont. And so afterwards, everything becomes about the altercation, which it was not, between Mbappe and Neymar, who were best mates when in 2017, and suddenly are presented as two rivals within PSG. Who's going to be the boss, the alpha male within the dressing room? This, as you said, this goes completely against what Christophe Galtier is trying to do at PSG. He's not that kind of manager. He doesn't want that kind of team. He doesn't want egos to be on show like that, and so on and so forth. But the whole thing just took off, and took a dimension which was just ridiculous. Everybody was talking about it, and as I said, I waited half an hour to get on air because of people talking, making hypotheses about what that meant for PSG. The fact that there had been a 30-second exchange between Neymar and Mbappe at the penalty spot in a game that PSG won by 5-2, and their record for the season now stands at 3 games played, 3 games won, 2 goals against, 14 goals scored, 1 trophy in the bag, and top of the league.
It's all gone wrong, Philippe. It's all gone wrong.
It's just crazy. But it shows you what it's all about with PSG. Now, things have happened since then, which are interesting, is that I think the club hierarchy, the new club hierarchy, because it's been all changed at PSG, since Galtier has arrived. And it's not just Galtier, it's also Luis Campos, the sports director who was with Galtier at Lille beforehand. And they decided to call a meeting with all the parties, that is, Campos, Galtier, Neymar, Mbappe, and they cleared the air. And I think Galtier made his point very clearly. He's not the kind of manager that you would expect to make his point in any other way. And basically, they've decided that the whole, that was it. That was the end of the story. We were never going to talk about it. Obviously, they've obviously found some kind of gentleman's agreement, if I can use this expression, in that particular context, for who is going to take the penalties next time. And now, the other thing as well is that in France, this also kickstarted a debate, who is the best penalty taker? And everybody decided to go for Neymar as the best penalty taker, because when you look at him taking penalties, he looks at the keeper, walks to the ball, runs to the ball, but until the very last second is watching the keeper, how his feet are moving, and therefore he can decide at the very last second, at the moment of impact, which way he's going to send the ball. So, which is a very difficult thing to perfect. Mbappe is not quite the same kind of penalty taker. But people were saying, Neymar is by far the best penalty taker. So I decided to look a little bit into my stats. I hope, Richie, you
go ahead. I like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I concentrated on penalties taken from Paris Saint-Germain in Ligue 1 for both players. Now, Mbappe has taken 13, scored 11, missed 2, which is very decent and actually slightly above average, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of penalty taking. And Neymar has taken 22 and scored 3. So he's taken exactly twice as many penalties as Mbappe. But the one difference is that he's missed one more, or if you're taking averages in consideration, in a way, he's missed one less if you're talking about averages. So the difference is minimal, if not infinitesimal. They're both very good at taking penalties. Neymar is not quite as good as people say he is at taking penalties, because when you listen to them, he's like Letizier or Giroud or one of these people who basically score every time. He's not quite there. But Mbappe is by no means a bad penalty taker. He's better than Messi, for example. So it's really, we've been talking for a few minutes about this. What should be a non-event? It's quite remarkable that there should be almost no difference between the records of those two players, certainly in Ligue 1 and for PSG, when it comes to taking penalties and putting them past the keeper. And still, there would be a pseudo debate about who's the better penalty taker of the two, and who should take them, and why it's unacceptable that so-and-so does this and unacceptable then so-and-so does that. It's absolutely ridiculous, but it just shows you, again, the space that PSG is taking into the coverage of French football in French media, but also elsewhere. We've been talking to each other for a few minutes about this, because in a way that comes to dominate the discourse or the analysis of PSG. And I'm wondering if it's got to do with the fact that, strangely enough, in 2022-23, PSG has not yet failed, and that people are looking around and thinking, there must be something wrong with this club, because there usually is. Could it be that? Because elsewhere, believe me, it's all going very well indeed for Galtier and the club at the beginning of the season, and they look very, very good.
Yeah.
And they look like they're a team, I wouldn't say on a mission, but they look fitter, they look hungrier, they play better, they've got a new tactical system, which seems to fit with the people they've got at their disposal much better than what Pochettino tried. They've got a manager who means business. Their recruitment has been quite clever. And you're thinking, did something really change at Paris Saint-Germain? And should we actually take them seriously? Which, to be honest, in Europe, we haven't done ever. We haven't done ever since, we haven't done since PSG was a completely different club, and the Qataris were not around.
Yeah.
But something has changed, definitely. I mean, the atmosphere is not the same. The quality of the game is not the same. The atmosphere within the camp is not the same. You carry on and on like that. But this has been the one false note, I would say, in what's been an excellent execution of a very, very good score since the beginning of this season.
I'd say on top of the penalty incident, at least from over here, what got almost as much attention was the Mbappe turning away when he didn't receive the ball from Vitinha in that particular game as well. That he turned away from the play, didn't seem interested, kind of almost looked as if he wasn't all together with the game. And then there was that story that came out afterwards that he apparently was dealing with personal issues and that infringed upon his attitude in the game. How much was there to that?
We won't dwell on the personal issues. Okay. I've heard the same thing, and I've heard it from people whom I would usually trust. So I can accept that there are personal issues, and in which case we should leave them. This is the player's privacy we're talking about. So that might have been a factor, and it's not the first time that Mbappe has had a little, has behaved on the pitch as someone who was not totally interested. It's sometimes overdoing it a little bit in his reactions. He's not the only football superstar I can think of who does that. Mm-hmm. But I think far too much has been read into it. It's that the attention is focused, because it was his comeback game, on him and on them in such a fashion that you're bound to find a moment where the player is looking, I to be honest, Richie, I find this quite dispiriting, because I don't think that Mbappe is thinking, oh, I made a huge mistake by signing on this extraordinary contract, one of the best ever, given to a footballer in the history of the game, because Neymar is actually looking really good this season. I might not be the alpha male after all. I don't think he's exactly that kind of player and that kind of young man. And I think far too much is being read into that at the moment.
I'm just curious as well, how accurate are the stories? Like, obviously they moved heaven and earth to keep him this summer, and one of those agreements with which they came to with Mbappe was that he'd have a degree of decision making, I believe, within the club. How accurate or not is that story?
There was again, I wish I had a definite answer to that, and if I had a definite answer to that, I would be the most in-demand journalist on the planet. Okay. What I do understand is that there were, when they were talking about it, obviously his status within the team and the way that the team was going to be led and managed came into that, because I think one of the major problems that Mbappe had with the club was the fact that we didn't quite know where the club was heading in terms of strategy. Now, they've made some very strong choices during the summer. Bringing Galtier in is a very strong choice. Bringing Luis Campos is a very strong choice. And that really cuts the club from the previous period, which was Leonardo having conflict, being in conflict, constant conflict with every single of his managers, where you had a super powerful, super divisive sports director taking sometimes debatable decisions when it comes to recruitment, and who was associated with top-level managers, Mauricio Pochettino, Thomas Tuchel, people like that, talking really the cream of the cream of technical coaches in Europe here. And there was constant conflict because nobody could agree on a strategy. Now, what they've looked at, obviously, is that this couldn't carry on, so we need to put in a structure that makes some sense. And they've got it. They decided to go for the Lille model. They looked at, well, who actually showed us how a club should be run, certainly on that side of things. It was Lille, when Lille won the title. And you think, well, they won the title with players who are not quite as good as ours, but they won it because they had a fantastic sports director, and I think everybody would agree with that, Luis Campos, and a remarkable technician, manager, coach, Christophe Galtier, who is also a former player, who is somebody who's got tons of experience within Ligue 1 as well. And we put these two people together who seem to get on well, and we actually give them some latitude. We enable them to do their job properly, whereas in the past, it was always interference from one department into the other. And because of that, things were not working. And it has changed. So it's not the same Paris Saint-Germain we're talking about. It's still owned by the Qataris. Nasser Al-Khelaifi is still in charge. But when it comes to the team itself, the whole landscape has been changed.
You mentioned. Go on ahead, sorry.
Yes, sorry.
I was just mentioning. You mentioned a change in tactical
yes.
formation. They've essentially, looking at their last couple of fixtures, they've gone to 3 at the back, which seems a way of getting Sergio Ramos in there. Marquinhos is obviously in there. Presnel Kimpembe, who was I don't know. It seemed like one stage 50-50 whether he'd stay or go in the summer, is staying. He's there on the left hand side of defence, and it seems to be working for them, and seems to be able to get the best out of Marco Verratti in midfield, and everything from a footballing perspective certainly does seem a little bit more harmonious than before.
Yes, because they had to think of a way to accommodate players who sometimes could look a little bit like pieces from a different puzzle. Now, but they've got certainties in this team, as in Donnarumma is a magnificent keeper. I know he's made some mistakes. Everybody thinks about Real Madrid game and so forth, but he's a very young keeper. And, there's absolutely no problem. He's a perfectly fit number one. Marquinhos has been a magnificent servant to this club. He is the fulcrum of the defense. So he's got, on his right, Ramos, who is not quite as quick as he used to be. He's not quite the player he used to be, but he remains a very fine, very experienced, very intelligent, very smart, streetwise, to use a euphemism, kind of defender. And Kimpembe being put there on the left with Marquinhos, in charge of the most important, of basically organizing the line, keeps him in check. Then you've got two superb wing-backs, Hakimi and Mendes. I mean, two superb players. Then you've got a midfield where you've got Vitinha has arrived, who gives balance. And you've got Verratti, and we all know that Verratti is a gem that we have never quite seen delivering consistently at the level we would expect him to deliver. Given his talent, he should be one of the very best midfielders on the planet. His performances have not always reflected that, but now he's within a system which fits him better. And then up front, we've got the three, obviously, Mbappe, Neymar, and Messi. You put Messi in a role as almost as a 9.5 and a 10, and you've got Neymar and Mbappe as a kind of double pivot up front.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That honestly, that's
it's scary. It's still scary.
It's absolutely scary. Yes.
What struck me there, though, when you were talking about Verratti, you might as well have been talking about PSG in Europe for the past few seasons, because you're talking about having all the tools. Everybody presumes that he/they are going to go on and become the best in Europe, and it maybe hasn't quite happened yet. Europe is going to be the litmus test again for this team this season.
But you see the difference. The difference is that in the past they've put their faith into bringing in what I would call super managers who were going to mold the team to their own particular tactical outlook. I'm thinking of Pochettino. I'm thinking of Tuchel. Tuchel, by the way, came so close. And before that, Unai Emery was a bit of a casting error, but still a very good manager. Obviously Ancelotti in the past as well. This time they've thought, okay, why don't we take somebody whom we know will be able to deal with this kind of squad, like Galtier. And I think, Richie, we've been talking about Galtier a few times in the past on this program, because I'm a fan and I've been for a very long time. The work is done at Saint-Etienne. The work is done at Lille. The work is done at Nice. Everybody screams, this guy is a top manager. But he's not he's not a super coach. He's more in a kind of the Deschamps mold, more expressive perhaps in terms of the football that he wants his teams to play. But he's first and foremost a leader of players. And he's very good at making his players relate to him, whatever their statuses can be. Mutatis mutandis, I would say he perhaps could be to PSG what Zinedine Zidane has been to Real Madrid. I know it's a huge claim that I'm making now, but he's somebody who knows how to deal with big egos. He's somebody who knows how to have a good balance in the dressing room, at the same time, tactically very aware, knows the game inside out, knows the opponents in European football inside out, fantastic experience of Liga as well. He's a perfect fit. And I have to say, as somebody who is not necessarily that well inclined towards a Qatar-owned club, I've always had this fear that they would bring in somebody like him in the club and they might actually make it work. Which, okay, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek when I'm saying here, but I think you get my drift.
Yeah,
I think he's ideally suited to that crazy club.
I was reading a line about, it was funny enough, about Steve Cooper, the Nottingham Forest boss, before Saturday's game with West Ham, and in coaching terms, he was framed as being something of a facilitator, and I think that's the same message I'm getting from you about Galtier, in that he gives the players enough leeway to, I guess, perform to the optimal abilities, while also
Yeah, you say that. He's a disciplinarian.
Okay.
He's very, very tough on his players. But he's tough in a way they can understand and relate to. Galtier was a very fine player himself. He was not a Zidane, of course, maybe on, like Pochettino, perhaps, almost that kind of level, almost.
Okay.
But he was a very fine footballer himself. and he has a knack of getting people on side. He's both tough. He's also very understanding towards young players. He's one of those, he's his mid-50s now, Galtier, but he's not one of those older managers who would have trouble relating to players from completely different generation with completely different interests, who would be, in their late teens or early 20s. He's very good at that. And actually, I think that, in fact, if you look at the number of players that is involved, young players is involved since the beginning of the season within PSG in those 3 games, he's already involved more players than Pochettino and Tuchel and Emery had done at a similar stage. So I do think he's a really great fit. I do think that the the absence of a kind of starry recruitment is also very telling, in the way that they know what they've got. This is what they want to carry on with. They do not need yet another upheaval with yet another super ego landing. And because of all of that, and the fact as well, I repeat that, he's also a very, very sound tactician. So you put all of this together, you think, well, we've got perhaps a winning formula here.
Yeah, sounds scary, all right. Sounds pretty scary. Just in terms of, like, you mentioned at the top the amount of oxygen that one little discussion on field between Neymar and Mbappe took up. I mean, that's in microcosm the PSG issue, is that they take up so much oxygen of the league around them. In terms of, I guess, the outsider's view, perhaps not in France, I can't speak to that at all, but certainly the Ligue 1 is viewed through the prism of Paris Saint-Germain from this point at the moment. It's not, unfortunately, Marseille. It's not in your Monacos or your Lilles, even though they won the league quite recently. Everything is viewed through those navy tinted glasses, essentially. Well,
it's understandable, given that you've got 3 players called Messi, Mbappe, and Neymar up front for that team. What do you expect? I will wait when it comes to Marseille, because Marseille will always surprise us, and there will be a lot of talk about Marseille as well. But they're so far ahead that, yes, it's bound to be one of those situations where a club, yes, literally sucks out the oxygen. It's something I've said many times. Ligue 1 cannot live with PSG, but Ligue 1 cannot live without PSG either. It's the situation that the French league has been in ever since 2011, when the Qataris decided to buy the club. So it's not going to change. It might be even more pronounced this year if they do well in Europe, which I'm expecting them to do. And of course, people will not be talking about other clubs as much as they should, which is a pity, because I think anybody who watches Ligue 1, has watched Ligue 1 over the last season in particular, will have seen that the league, the level has improved. that I think there was a record number of goals scored as well in Ligue 1 all time, which is quite remarkable. But which is a fair reflection of the improvement in the quality of football that we are seeing in the league, which has been remarkable. There are some really, really lovely teams to watch in France. So this is my 15 seconds of advertisement here. But, watch Strasbourg, watch Clermont. They're small teams. Well, Strasbourg is a huge club in so many ways, but Clermont is a small club. But watch them play, and you realize actually it's not that bad at all. I think when you watched Brest-Marseille the other day, I think people will have been surprised how good Brest were. You think, and how positive they were when they had the ball. And it's actually a fun league to watch. But all the oxygen is sucked quite normally by a team that's got, world champions in it, and some of the biggest stars that of 21st century football. So there's nothing much we can do about that.
I want to go off on a tangent somewhat. We'll keep our base in Nice essentially, because one of the stories doing the rounds today is that Jim Ratcliffe, who's obviously part owner of Nice, and obviously the owner of Ineos, is reportedly, and I don't know how much stock we can put in that, but reportedly interested in buying Manchester United. I was just wondering what the impression is of Jim Ratcliffe and what he has done with Nice. Nice weren't like almost similar to Strasbourg, not a small club. There has been success there, obviously, in the past.
No, absolutely not.
And has he went in there with big money, and obviously with big money come big notions and big ideas that the club is going to expand, and they've made their mark in Europe to a degree as well in the last few years. But what's the sense of Jim Ratcliffe in the French game?
If you talk to OGC Nice fans, they're underwhelmed. They were expecting far more. They thought that Ratcliffe would use Nice as more than a springboard, that he would see that there was big potential in that particular club, which is by far the biggest club in that part of France. And, to find a club that is equal or superior in this case in terms of status, reputation, attractivity, and so forth, you're looking at Marseille, which is quite a long way away from Nice. So people were expecting far more, and I think because they didn't quite understand how Ratcliffe was thinking about his personal investment into football. So yes, people have been underwhelmed. They were hoping for a kind of Roman Abramovich, and they realized that what they got was more of a glazer. And I'm not saying, by the way, that Ratcliffe, used leverage buyout to get control of the club. That's not the way it went. But it's part of his long-term strategy of investing in sport and of building a portfolio of clubs, of which Nice probably is not going to be the flower, the Kohinoor, the diamond. He's always wanted to get something bigger. We know that he went when Abramovich had to sell Chelsea. Ratcliffe came on the scene very late, too late, but he did come on the scene. And obviously, he's looking for a big club somewhere. And he's looking to build an international portfolio of clubs, because let's not forget that Ratcliffe also owns Lausanne in Switzerland, and he owns Nice, and he clearly wants another club in a big league. He also has very close links with a very good club in the Ivory Coast called Racing d'Abidjan. I'm not too sure if he owns it or if he's a main partner, but in any case, he has very close links to that. Yeah. I mean, it's part of this restructuring of European football, which is happening before our eyes, which I think people are not aware of, which is completely linked to multiple club ownership.
Like the City Group is the one that I think people will be familiar with, but obviously like the Red Bull model. You only have to look at the transfers that have gone between the two clubs in the past couple of years, even with Šeško there in recent weeks. Like it's quite clear that there are these little fiefdoms being built up all around Europe that involve a number of clubs. And But there will
It's
be
very worrying, Richie. Very, very worrying, because you're talking about those that people will be aware of, and the Qataris as well have also, they were at Casa Open, for example, in Belgium, in other places too. And the City Group is, in a way, the most honest, because at least we know what we're dealing with. They now have 10 or 11 clubs. I mean, everywhere from Uruguay to Japan to Melbourne to USA, and you can carry on like that. But it is something which is happening all across the board and in all divisions. And I think people are not aware of that. It probably is happening in Ireland, by the way. I would like to have a look at that. Who is actually starting to get interested in clubs and buying shares? I know, for example, of one case of a Russian investor who has got an direct interest in 7 clubs in Europe, lower division clubs, and who is also somebody who is very important on the gambling market. Now, you can, I say that, and I hope that there is a little, cold runs down your spine when I say it. And I'm not saying people like Ratcliffe or City Football Group or whatever are trying to rig the game. What I'm saying is that the very essence of the integrity of the game is being put in question here by what is going on. I believe that at the moment, in terms of multiple club ownership, when you're talking about top divisions in Europe, you're talking about well over 200 clubs.
Wow.
200.
That's astonishing.
Absolutely. It's absolutely astonishing. It's a subject that I'm working on with a couple of friends of mine. I do hope to come up with something interesting about it in not too long. But there is a huge problem on that side, and it's something which also is enabled and facilitated by the current rules and regulation, both by local member associations of FAs and by UEFA and by FIFA. There is no, you remember, like people like Duchâtelet, for example, had multiple interests. Somebody like Evangelos Marinakis, who is not exactly
Careful.
okay, I know, careful. Okay, well, Evangelos Marinakis, just look and have a look for yourself. Have a look at the clubs he controls, and you can Gerard Lopez. I mean, that's unbelievable, and that's on the record. And believe me, your lawyers will agree with me. It's absolutely astonishing that somebody like Gerard Lopez can be in charge of Lille, Boavista, Moucron, was in charge of Bordeaux at the same time. When you look at his track record in football, and this is allowed to happen, I mean, fair play to him and to them. They're using the regulations. I'm not saying they're breaching any regulations, which is where I've put the lawyers on my side. But on the other hand, what is happening is totally wrong. It's an assault, and I mean an assault on the integrity of the game. You cannot have people who own more than one club. You cannot have people. I mean, we're seeing all these investment funds at the moment coming from America and taking 20% here, 30% here. We see a Textor, for example, John Textor, who suddenly arrives. Oh, hello, I'm the Messiah. I'm going to save everything. Oh, yeah, but you have your own capital in this club and this club and this club and that club. How does this work?
That bell's a little bit hard to unring, though, essentially because you've got people who are operating then in different jurisdictions, which obviously would have their own individual laws. They have their own individual laws as they pertain to football. And on top of that, the money that they are bringing to the game, you would reason that football authorities, be it UEFA, FIFA, even CAF or CONMEBOL, would be scared to back away from that because it's guaranteed cash as far as they're concerned.
Richie, the only reason why these people are bringing money in the game is to take money out of the game.
Oh, sure.
Right?
I'm not disagreeing there. Yeah.
They're not generous investors who have got the best interests of the clubs at heart. They're in there to make a buck. This is the only way that you can understand their involvement. Ratcliffe doesn't care about Nice. Ratcliffe doesn't care about X, Y, or Z, right? He doesn't. I mean, this is the whole bloody nonsense that we have to deal with. Boehly is not a Chelsea fan. Wake up, guys. He's not a Chelsea fan. He's a very smart US investor who works mostly with other people's money, by the way, who has seen an opportunity in European football. And by the way, that's his absolute right. There's nothing wrong with that. What is wrong is the fact that the people who have got the regulatory bodies who are there and could actually say, you know what? No, we don't think it's okay for the same person or the same investment fund to have money involved in separate clubs in different leagues. Who could be, because what happens? There's the possibility of match rigging, which you've got to think about. There's the possibility of also financial arrangements between those sister clubs or brother clubs, whatever you want to call them, by which, for example, something we saw in Italy, by which the value of players is inflated in both senses in order to cook the books. We've seen that happening. I'm not saying these people are doing it. I'm saying this is the potentiality. Then we've got the possibility as well of using clubs purely as feeder clubs and to make money in the transfer market by diverting the money made from transferring players from one club to the next out of the club's books into other companies. I'm not going to give a name here, but I've got one which I have in mind, and I know exactly what happened. And this happened in European football. It was allowed to happen because multiple club ownership is allowed by UEFA and FIFA. Despite all they've said on the subject, saying it was a bad thing. Of course it's a bad thing. Now do something about it, guys.
Philippe, I look forward to seeing what you have in the pipeline on this subject, because it's one that I could honestly sit here with you and go over for another few hours. The lawyers potentially wouldn't be that happy with us to do it live.
Make sure you bring the lawyers in, because otherwise, and let's never do this such a thing live, because we would be in massive trouble.
We'll keep tabs on it anyway. I'll keep somebody fact checking in the corner as we go on next time. But Philippe, it's been an absolute pleasure as always to speak, and thank you so much for taking time out to talk to us. And don't forget, football here on Off the Ball is brought to you by Sky. Watch over 400 games this season from the Premier League, WSL, Scottish Premiership and EFL live on Sky Sports. Philippe, thank you.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, get all the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.